The Florida sun was already burning by the time I stepped onto the porch, but the heat wasn't what made my stomach twist. It was the letter in my hand, the one I'd been too afraid to open for 2 days. The one with my sister's handwriting across the front, bold and angry like it had been carved into the paper. I could smell the salt drifting in from the coast, mixing with the scent of old wood and lemon oil from the rocking chair I'd been meaning to fix. Somewhere in the distance, a cicada wind. The whole morning seemed to pause, holding its breath with me. When I finally slid a finger under the seal, the paper trembled. My eyes caught the first line and froze. Sell the farm, Margaret. It's time. You have no idea what you're sitting on. I read it again. The words weren't a request, they were an ultimatum. My sister Lorna had been trying for years to convince me to let go of the property our father left us. 50 acres of stubborn Florida land, half wild and half cultivated, bordered by the same fence posts he'd sunk with his bare hands. But there was something she didn't know, something I'd never told a soul. And if she ever found out, selling would be the least of my worries. I set the letter down on the porch table, my heart thudding against my ribs. The cicada's buzz seemed louder now, like a warning. Inside the house, the floorboards groaned, though I was alone. Or at least, I thought I was. It started the way all bad things do with a memory I didn't invite. I was 12, standing in the barn with Daddy, the smell of hay thick in the air. He was whispering in that low, urgent tone he used when he didn't want Mama to hear. You keep what I'm about to tell you locked up in your heart. You hear me? Some things are worth more than gold, but they can cost you your life. I hadn't understood then, not really. But after he passed, the pieces started falling into place. The farm wasn't just dirt and timber, it was hiding something. Something I'd sworn to protect. And now Lorna wanted it gone. I stepped inside, the air cooler but still heavy. The house had the stillness of a place that's seen too much. The kind that presses on your skin. A framed photograph on the wall caught my eye. Daddy in his overalls, one hand on the fence, the other gripping a shovel. There was a look in his eyes I'd never noticed before. Something almost afraid. The phone rang, making me jump. It was the old landline, the one only a few people had the number to. When I picked up, the line was silent for a beat too long. Then a man's voice, low and rough. Miss Margaret, don't sign anything, not yet. The line went dead. My knees went weak. Nobody called me Miss Margaret except the folks who'd known Daddy back in the day, and most of them were gone. I moved to the window, scanning the long dirt road that led to the highway. Heat shimmered above it, bending the air. But at the far end, I thought I saw a shape tall, still, watching. The letter on the porch table fluttered in a breeze I couldn't feel. And in that moment, I knew 2 things. 1, this wasn't about selling a farm anymore. And 2, whatever was coming had already started. I didn't even bother locking the door behind me. It wouldn't have made a difference. Out here, if someone wanted in, a deadbolt was nothing but an inconvenience. The sun was higher now, bleaching the fields into pale gold. A few stubborn palmettos swayed in the humid breeze, their fronds whispering against each other. I could almost imagine they were gossiping about Mitha, woman too stubborn to sell, too sentimental to let go, and too blind to see the danger. But I wasn't blind, not anymore. I grabbed Daddy's old Winchester from the rack above the fireplace. The wood was worn smooth by his hands, the metal still smelling faintly of oil. I didn't load it, not yet. I didn't want to look like I was expecting trouble, even if I was. When I stepped back outside, the shape on the road was gone. No dust, no footprints, just the endless stretch of heat and silence. The kind of silence that makes you think you're alone until you're not. I took the letter inside and placed it under the coffee tin on the kitchen counter. My eyes kept drifting to it, like it might start speaking again if I looked away too long. That's when the knocking started. 3 sharp raps, too hard to be friendly. I froze. The sound came from the back door, the one almost nobody used, the one that opened straight into the mudroom where Daddy used to keep the feed barrels. I moved slowly, the boards creaking under my weight. The Winchester felt heavier with each step. When I opened the door, there was nothing but the empty porch, and a cardboard box sitting neatly in the middle of it. It was the size of a shoebox, wrapped in brown paper and tied with rough twine. No return address. My name was written in black marker, in handwriting I didn't recognize. I crouched and untied the twine. Inside was a stack of photographs, old ones. Some are black and white, and some are faded color. and every single one showed my farm but from angles I'd never seen. Overhead shots, like they'd been taken from a plane. Some close-ups of the barn roof. One of the old wells is behind the oak tree, and in the corner of almost every photo, the same figure, tall, still, watching. My stomach turned cold. I didn't even hear the footsteps behind me until a shadow fell across the porch. "You should have sold it when you had the chance," the voice said. I spun, rifle up, but the space was empty. The photos slipped from my hands, scattering across the porch. When I bent to gather them, I noticed something I'd missed before in the corner of one shot. The well's lid was open, and there was something inside, glinting in the sunlight. I didn't want to look, but I knew I had to. And that was the first step toward the mistake that would change everything. I carried the shoebox photographs to the back acre, the grass brushing my calves, the air so wet it felt like rain without the mercy. The old oak watched me like a witness, its branches draped with Spanish moss that moved in the breeze like thin gray veils. Beyond it, the well squatted low and stubborn, the round concrete ring cracked from a lifetime of summers. I knelt and brushed away the grit from the lid. My fingers came back rust brown. In the photo, the lid was open, and something inside had flashed like a small sun. I slid the iron latch and heaved. The hinge protested with a grinding moan I felt in my teeth. Cold air climbed up my arms from the shaft, smelling of limestone and old rain. Far below, water whispered against rock. I leaned in, squinting. For a second, I saw nothing but darkness layered on darkness. Then, there it was, a sliver of light catching on a curve of metal, maybe 10 feet down, wedged just above the waterline, on a shelf cut into the stone. I tied Daddy's old feed rope around the base of the oak and looped the other end around my waist. The knot held like it remembered him. I lowered myself carefully, palms burning against the rope, boots finding small holds where the stone bulged or dipped. The well walls were damp and cool. The heat slid off my shoulders as if it couldn't follow me here. Halfway down I paused, breathing in the mineral sting. The glint winked at me again. When my boot reached the shelf, I felt metal under my toe. I set my weight gently and reached into a shallow cavity. My fingers brushed oiled cloth thick and tacky, wrapped around a small tin, not a box, lunch pail size, the kind Daddy carried when I was little, dented along one side. I hugged it to my chest and climbed back up, hand over shaking hand, the rope rasping a dry song. At the lip, I rolled to the grass and lay there for a breath or two, staring at the sky until the brightness stopped stinging. The cloth peeled away with a sticky whisper. Inside, the tin smelled like pennies and cedar. A brass key lay on top, old but heavy, its bow stamped with a compass rose. Beneath it, a sheaf of paper oilskin-wrapped maps, creased and stubborn end. A folded note browned at the edges. My name was on the outside, written in Daddy's blocky hand. I didn't realize I was holding my breath until it slipped out on a little gasp. "If you're reading this, Maggie," the note began, "someone pushed you to it. Don't sign a thing, not from Lorna and not from the men who come smiling and saying they're friends. The key goes to the survey chest in the barn. The maps show what we bought and what they tried to steal. If a man calls you Miss Margaret and knows my first dog's name, you can trust him. If not, burn this and run." I swallowed hard. My eyes blurred at the line about the dog, because the name came back like a bell. Peppa, a black and white mutt who slept on my feet every storm for 8 years. I tucked the note into my shirt pocket and slid the brass key into my jeans. The maps I folded back into the oilskin and jammed both under my arm. The cicadas swelled and fell, like the land itself was breathing faster. A twig snapped behind me. I turned so quickly the tin popped against my ribs. The yard was empty, no one there but the oak and the blue slash of sky. But at the far end of the fence where the palmettos pressed close, something darker than shade dipped and vanished. Not a deer, too steady, too upright. I gathered everything and hurried to the barn. Inside, the air was dust and hay and the sweet memory of molasses. Light from the high slats fell in thin ladders on the floor. I went straight to the feed room, to the low trunk I had opened since Walter's funeral, the old carpenter's chest he'd called the survey chest. The lock plate had always been ornamental, a little flourish he'd added for pride. I'd never had a key. The brass key slid in like it had been waiting. The tumblers turned with an oiled click. Inside, rolls of vellum maps tied with cotton tape, a ledger bound in cracked leather, a canvas bag heavy with something that thunk, and a small tin of film negatives in paper sleeves, the edges gone soft. On the first map, I saw our fence line and the neighbor's lines marked in neat black. Then, a second set of lines beneath, faint and red, cutting under the first like a shadow. Subsurface rights. My skin prickled. Florida isn't oil country. Not here, but water is gold. And limestone is money, and there's a whole river underground. If someone had shifted the subsurface parcels years ago, moved boundaries under the table, the land above might look innocent while the money flowed beneath, quiet as a spring. From the doorway came a soft knock to quick taps. Then a pause, then two more. The pattern Daddy used when he didn't want to scare the chickens. I closed the chest and slid the key into my boot. "Who's there?" My voice came out stronger than I felt. "A friend, Miss Margaret," a man called. Not rough, not slick either. Tired. Pepper was a fine dog. Everything inside me went still, like a lake smoothing after a stone. "Step where I can see you," he did slowly, hands out, tall, mid-60s, sun-cured skin, and a clean shirt that had seen better summers. He carried a hat in his hands like it was a thing to apologize for. "Name," I said. "Henry Beaumont," he replied. "Folks called me Hank. Worked with your daddy and Walter on the old county assessments. I'm the one who called you this morning." My shoulders eased a fraction without my permission. "Why now?" "Because your sister's not the one I'm worried about," he said. "She's a lever. Someone else is the hand. They sent the photos to rattle you. They've been mapping this property for months. Drones, hired pilots, quiet as ghosts." He tipped his chin at the chest. "And they want what's in there." "What is in here, Mr. Beaumont?" The steadiness in my voice surprised me. "Proof," he said simply. 29 years ago, a developer recorded a clerical correction that wasn't clerical at all, moved the subsurface line under your northern pasture and under 3 neighbors' parcels to intersect with a limestone seam. Since then, they've been mining through a sister company 10 miles east. Different names, same pockets. If you sell, they launder the whole mess in one closing. "Who's they?" He hesitated. "Harbor and Vale Group, out-of-state money. Local faces, some of those faces sit on the church board and the county planning commission." I let out a breath that tasted like old metal. Lorna said, "I don't know what I'm sitting on." "She knows just enough to be dangerous," Hank said. "They promised to pay off her medical debt and buy her a condo on the coast. Told her you'd be happier somewhere with less maintenance." He couldn't keep the bitterness out of the word. I looked at the maps, at the careful red lines like veins under skin, and the watcher on the road. Message: "You're not alone." He glanced toward the door. Also a mistake. People who think they own everything forget that watchers can be watched. A dry chuckle escaped me, sharper than I meant it to be. "And what do I do with this proof?" He lifted a shoulder. "Make copies. Put them in 3 places that have nothing to do with one another. Then decide whether you want to pry open the hornet's nest or sell the land to someone who won tea. Let it be paved. Either way, don't meet them alone. And don't go to the sheriff. Because he's the hand," I said. "Or his brother is," Hank replied. In the loft above us, a board creaked. Hank and I both looked up. Dust floated like a slow snowfall. I pointed to the ladder. He shook his head and moved silently beneath it, then sprang up 2 rungs at a time with a quickness that startled me. "Hello there," he said to the shadows. "You've picked a bad day to nest." Something scuffed, then Rana Lightfoot. Fast. Hank was faster. He caught a wrist, and a small cry answered him. He froze. "Easy," he said, gentler now. "Come on out." A girl stepped into the light. 16 maybe, freckles, torn jeans, a backpack slung across one shoulder, and eyes fierce and scared at the same time. I knew her not by name, but by the set of her jaw. She was from the trailer park off County Road 9, always walking past with a notebook and a pencil tucked behind her ear. "What were you doing up there?" I asked, softer than I felt. "Sleeping," she shot back. "No one comes in the mornings." "I'm not hurting anything." I put everything back how it was. "And the drone?" Hank asked. She chewed her lip. "Not mine, but I've seen it. Black, small, no noise until it's right on you." "Which way does it fly when it leaves?" Hank asked. She pointed past the oak toward the far fence line and the scrub beyond. "There, over the ditch, then west." Hank met my eyes. "Toward Harbor and Vale's survey yard." The girl's gaze landed on the open chest, on the maps. Something changed in her face recognition. She dug in her backpack and pulled out a roll of glossy prints. "I took these with my mom's old Nikon," she said, "from the water tower 2 miles down. I thought nobody'd care, but then a guy in a black Tahoe started showing up on my bus route." Hank spread the prints on a hay bale. Overhead shots, crisp and bright, lines in the ground that didn't belong to rain or a tractor. A grid cut into the palmetto like a code. And there, in the corner of one frame, the same Tahoe, the same black square where a back window should be. "I'm Jess," the girl said suddenly, "chin up. If you need someone to climb where you can't, I can do it. I don't scare easy." I looked at her, at Hank, at the chest open like a mouth waiting to be fed. A heat built in my chest that wasn't Florida weather. Not fear, not yet. Something older, something that came from the stubborn part of me. Folks liked to call trouble when I was young and brave. Before I could answer, a low hum rolled across the field, so faint I thought it was a mosquito, until the shadow slid over the barn roof. The light dimmed. Jess flinched. Hank's head snapped toward the door. "Drone," he said. "Big one." A second hum answered the first, deeper, coming from the road, the kind of engine you feel in your ribs. Headlights spilled across the front yard and held there, high and white, like eyes that didn't blink. Hank closed the chest and kicked a burlap sack over it. I shoved the oilskin maps under my shirt, the edges scratchy against my skin, and slid Daddy's note deeper into my pocket until the paper warmed. The barn door filled with light. Hank's hand found my elbow. "Back," he whispered, "to the tack room. Quiet now." The hum deepened, vibrating the nails in the beams. Someone outside cut the truck engine. A man cleared his throat. Calm, patient, the kind of patience that makes your skin want to run. "Miss Margaret," he called, almost cheerful. "Let's talk." The days following the auction announcement were heavy with tension. I could feel it in the air as soon as I stepped outside, the way neighbors glanced over fences, the way whispers cut off when I passed by. Small towns had a knack for stretching gossip into the shape of truth. And in Cedar Hollow, the truth was whatever the loudest voices said it was. The loudest voice, unfortunately, belonged to my niece, Leela. She had taken to social media, typing out dramatic posts about how I was selling off the family's heritage and turning my back on generations of hard work. She added in a line about being too stubborn to let the younger generation handle things, which got plenty of likes and a few angry face emojis from people I had once considered friends. One afternoon, as I was patching a loose shutter on the porch, her car rolled up the gravel drive. The sun glinted off the hood like a warning flare. Leela stepped out wearing her work heels, the sound of them clicking against the wood porch sharp enough to make the old dog under the swing lift his head. "Aunt Marie, we need to talk," she began, arms crossed, voice clipped. I set the hammer down and wiped my hands on my apron. "I'm listening." "Why are you doing this? Selling the farm?" Her tone was more accusation than question. "You could lease it to someone local. You could give us a chance to run it." I sighed. "You've had years to take an interest, Leela, and when your father was alive, he offered to teach you. You never came around unless there was a barbecue." She flinched. "The truth can hit harder than an insult. That's not fair." "It's fair," I said, steady but not unkind. "This place isn't just soil and fences. It's working before dawn and patching roofs in the rain. It's watching the bank account drain when a season turns bad. You want the title but not the burden." Her eyes narrowed. "Or maybe you just don't trust me." "I don't trust that you love it for the right reasons," I admitted. "This land is in my blood, Lila, but I can't keep it alive on sentiment alone. Selling it now, on my terms, is the only way to keep the roof over my head and my dignity intact." Her jaw tightened, but I could see the flicker of guilt in her eyes. She looked away, scanning the fields where hay bales sat like giant, lazy chess pieces. "You know, once it's gone forever." "I know," I said softly. "That's why I'm saying goodbye the right way." Before she could respond, a horn honked from the road, a delivery truck. The driver hopped down and handed me a small package. Inside was an old, leather-bound ledger I'd ordered from an estate sale in another county. The moment I opened it, the faint smell of cedar and ink drifted up, and my breath caught. It was my father's handwriting. Pages upon pages of neat rose cattle counts, rainfall notes, and personal remarks in the margins. Memories inked in looping cursive. He'd written about the time the barn roof caved in during a storm, the summer the river flooded, and the winter he traded 2 hogs for a neighbor's broken tractor just to fix it up. Flipping through those pages, I realized this farm had never been just about land. It was about resilience, about knowing when to hold Anna and when to let go. And though Leela didn't know it yet, that ledger was going to be part of what I gave her. Not the acres, not the debt, but the story. The real inheritance. 2 weeks before the sale, the air on the farm felt different. Even the wind through the palmettos seemed to carry a kind of restlessness, as though the land itself sensed the change coming. Every day I woke before sunrise, making my rounds like I always had. I'd walk the fence lines, check the gates, and scatter feed for the chickens even, though half of them had already been spoken for by neighbors. The cows gathered at the far end of the pasture, their warm breath fogging in the early chill, completely unaware that in a matter of days, they'd be moving on to new pastures. The kitchen table was buried under papers, contracts, valuation reports, and the auctioneer's glossy pamphlets with their wide, grinning promises of top dollar guaranteed. I'd read every line twice, not because I didn't understand them, but because I wanted to be sure I wasn't missing something. The older you get, the more you learn that the devil's favorite hiding place is in the fine print. That morning, as I poured my coffee, I noticed a truck slowing on the road out front. A tall man in a dusty ball cap stepped out and leaned against the fence, his silhouette framed by the soft orange of the dawn. "Morning, Miss Marie," he called, tipping his hat. "Morning, Daniel," I replied. Daniel owned the feed store in town and had known me since I was a girl. "I heard about the sale," he said, resting his arms on the fence. "Thought maybe I could make you an offer before the big day. Keep it in local hands." I studied his face. He was a good mannerist, steady, the kind of person who paid his bills on time and helped strangers push their cars out of ditches. But I also knew the farm was more than he could afford without putting himself into a hole he'd never climb out of. "I appreciate that, Daniel," I said carefully, "but I can't let sentiment cost you your future. This place will demand more than you think, and I won't watch it ruin another person I care about." He didn't argue, just gave me a long look, one that said he understood but wished things could be different. Later that afternoon, Leela showed up again, this time without the heels, without the social media firestorm. She wore work boots and had dirt smudged on her jeans. I caught her in the barn, running her hands over the old milking stalls like she was trying to memorize the feel of them. "I wanted to help today," she said quietly. "No arguments, just help." And she did. We stacked hay, cleaned out the tack room, and even mended a section of fence together. We didn't talk much, but the silence felt different, less like a wall, more like a truce. By sundown, as we stood at the edge of the property, watching the light fade over the pasture, Leela spoke again. "I still don't like it, but I get it, at least a little." I didn't answer right away. I just handed her the old ledger from my father and said, "If you want to understand, start here." She opened it right there in the fading light, her fingers brushing the worn edges, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a shift, not in the outcome, but in the way she saw me. Maybe even in the way she saw the farm. The sale was still coming. The goodbye was still inevitable. But in that moment, with the cicadas starting their nighttime chorus and the sky painted in streaks of gold and violet, I realized something. Letting go didn't mean erasing what came before. It meant trusting that the story would outlive the soil. The week of the auction arrived with a strange, heavy stillness. Even the weather seemed to pause, the Florida humidity hanging in the air like it was waiting for something to break. I spent the days leading up to it in a kind of ritual. Each morning I'd take my coffee onto the porch and look out over the land, committing every inch of it to memory: the crooked oak at the end of the driveway, the way the morning mist curled low over the pastures, and the faint smell of citrus from the neighbor's grove drifting in when the wind was just right. Neighbors stopped by more often than usual, some with pies or casseroles, others with nothing more than their presence and a handshake. They didn't need to say they were sorry. I could see it in their eyes. The night before the sale, I walked the entire property line with a flashlight. The beam caught the familiar shine of the barbed wire, the glint of nails I'd hammered in decades ago. At the far north fence, I stopped and leaned against a post. My father used to bring me here when I was a little girl, pointing out constellations and telling me how the land beneath our feet had been in the family longer than any of those stars had been dead. I didn't sleep much that night. My mind kept running through every decision, every moment that had led to this point. Was there another way? Could I have fought harder? Or would that have only delayed the inevitable? letting the debts grow taller until they swallowed me whole. The morning of the sale, the farm was busier than it had been in years. Trucks lined the driveway, their tires kicking up pale clouds of dust. People wandered through the barn, peering into stalls, running their hands over the worn wood, like they were trying to read its history. The auctioneer's voice carried across the yard, sharp and rhythmic, turning bids into a kind of music. One by one, pieces of the farm's life slipped away. The old tractor went first, its engine still coughing to life on the first try. Then the herd split between 3 different buyers. The kitchen table that had been my mother's went to a couple from 2 towns over. I kept my face steady, but inside, it felt like someone was pulling threads out of me, one by one. When the final lot was called, the land itself, the air seemed to thicken. Bids came quickly at first, then slowed as the numbers climbed higher. My heart pounded as I watched hands rise and drop. Finally, the auctioneer's voice boomed, "Sold." The man who once stepped forward to shake my hand. He was younger than I expected, maybe in his early 40s, with a grip that was firm but not possessive. "I'll take good care of it," he said, meeting my eyes. I nodded, though the truth was, no matter how well he cared for it, it would never be ours again. That night, after everyone had gone and the driveway was quiet, I walked the land one last time. The cicadas sang in the darkness, and the moonlight painted everything silver. At the edge of the field, I knelt, pressed my palm to the ground, and whispered, "Thank you." Because no matter who owned it now, the farm had given me more than I could ever repay. And though the papers said it belonged to someone else, in the quiet corners of my heart, it always would.
A week after the sale, I drove back down the dirt road one last time. I wasn't there to linger, just to see it once more before the new owner settled in and put his mark on it. The for sale sign had been replaced with a fresh wooden one, painted white, with the new family name carved into it in bold letters. The barn doors stood wide open, and I could see workers moving equipment inside, rearranging things, making it their own. I sat in my truck at the edge of the driveway for a long time, watching. It wasn't grief anymore, not exactly. It was something quieter. Acceptance, maybe. Or the slow understanding that life doesn't wait for you to catch up. When I finally stepped out, my boots sank into the sandy soil, and the familiar smell of hay and orange blossoms wrapped around me. I walked toward the barn, not to interfere, just to take it in. The new owner spotted me, waved, and came over. "You must be her," he said. "The one who kept this place going all those years?" I smiled faintly. "I did my best." He hesitated, then said, "There's something you should know. When we bought the place, we planned on making it a commercial citrus operation. But after walking the land, my wife and I decided to keep the pastures open. We're bringing in horses, just like before. That surprised me more than I expected. Horses. Yeah. My little girl's been talking about riding since she could walk. I figured if this place could give her even a fraction of the life it gave you, it's worth keeping it alive." Something shifted in me. Then a small, fragile thread, stitching up one of the many tears the last few months had made. Before I left, I walked over to the old oak tree at the end of the driveway. It still leaned the same way, like it was bracing itself against the world. I reached out, running my hand over the rough bark, and thought about all the times I just stood here waiting for my father to come home from the fields. For my mother to call me in for supper, for my own children to come bounding down the path. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't sad, but because the sadness had settled into something steadier. Something I could carry without it breaking me. As I drove away, the farm shrinking in my rearview mirror, I realized that selling it hadn't erased it from my life. It had simply changed its shape. The memories, the lessons, the stubborn resilience I'd learned, those were mine to keep. And maybe, just maybe, letting go wasn't the same as losing.